processors, urban traders, and cross-border traders. As Dorothy said, we are not a homogeneous group. We are not just one group of poor, victimized women. There are women in Burundi who have come to us who have said, it's fantastic you're supporting the informal cross-women border trader to understand how to trade under the simplified trading regime, to trade a small value of goods, to understand formal access. I am formal. I am no longer a small women trader, but I still need help. I need access to markets. I need information. So one of the lessons we've learned, Dorothy is responding to you, is that we have to look at all the segments of women and all their diverse needs. At the core of our programming are strong partnerships built over the years at local, national, regional, and international level. These, of course, include the platform and the East African Business Council and the East African Community Secretariat, but numerous private sector and civil organizations across East Africa, such as EAC. We also partner internationally with the International Trade Center and various other UN organizations and other organizations to look at how we can impact jobs and incomes for women in East Africa. We commend the platform and the East African Business Council for convening this forum and for the significant strides that have been made over the years in building the capacity for women's associations and networks, and for their members to take up trading opportunities provided for under the Customs Union and Common Market. We also applaud the commitment of the government of Kenya in creating a gender-responsive policy environment, particularly around the public procurement affirmative action policy for women and the youth. We do recognize that there are budding challenges in the implementation of such policy and the capacity of uptake by women SMEs. That is why the business platform remains a critical partner in building the capacity of women to expand the business, share best practice, and importantly, innovation across the region. In the next 5 years, TMEA will look to scale up our programming, which we are now receiving support on, to reach over 300,000 women across Africa. And actually, my CEO told me before I came here, he wants us to hit 1 million, so that's going to be quite a challenge. We will leverage ICT to provide solutions to the challenges of access to market and trade information. We will ensure gender-based reforms are institutionalized, continue to strengthen women's associations and networks, to be able to represent their members, and support organizations like the East African Women in Business Platform to influence policy and bring information to women entrepreneurs across the region. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all very much for your contribution, for the remarks that you've given. I'd like to open the floor for anyone who has a question. We'll take 3 questions and then move on to the next session. If you have a question, this is the time for you.
Yeah, I'm Jacqueline Maleko, the chairperson of Tanzania Women Chambers of Commerce. Mine is a big compliment for Trademark East Africa. I commend Trademark, they've been hands-on to make sure that women are empowered economically. But today you mentioned a very important point, strengthening women association. In fact, as you are well aware, the political parties, they are strengthened because they even get a budget from the government. But the private sector associations, they are not. So we request, and that's where the big challenge is. You see somebody like Dorothy, she's spending a lot of time on the association, just like that. And even the secretariat, they cannot employ enough people to meet all the members because of limitations. And because of most of the associations, they depend on membership fee. A weak association cannot run the programs that we are going to deliberate. So we urge Trademark East Africa to really support our associations, especially the secretariat. But the second important thing is, yesterday I attended the meeting of academic, public, private partnership. And this is a wake-up call to all of us. Let's partner with our academic institutions, because there's a very big gap between the academia and the private sector. And yet, most of the private sector institutions, they are not performing because of skill gaps. And to deploy these skills, we need to partner with them right from the beginning. So we also want Trademark East Africa. There are some deliberations that came out of that meeting that the universities and academias, they are prepared to partner with the private sector. So let's see how we can partner with them, because they have the skills, they have the extension service, they have the knowledge, they have the incubators like the Center of Excellence in most of the countries. Like in my country, Nelson Mandela, they have Center of Excellence. How we can use this Center of Excellence to incubate our women? We need to be facilitated in that. And please, we are going to write proposals so that you can see how we can bridge this gap, because they are prepared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that question. Before we proceed, I'd like us to appreciate and welcome Honorable Aidan Mohammed onto the panel. We'll take 2 more questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Isabella Daniel Mwampamba, coming from Tanzania. My question goes to General Rosie. You have been speaking about gender issues, but to speak the truth, most of the women, they are very strong and they are very capable to do the business. But with the Tanzanian experience, we have a great challenge, especially for the women who are married. It's very hard, I'm telling you. I've passed that. I was to come with another woman to attend this meeting, but the husband said, "Where are you going? Why are you going to sleep?" Even me, to come here, it's a journey. So, really, I've seen your passion. But unless otherwise, we have a passion to the women, we can't do great things. So, my question, what are you doing really to help the women to speak out what is real bottom their hearts, especially for the women who are in villages and also who have not gone to school much like me? The situation real for the men who are here, it's very bad. Thank you.
I have 2 questions. Before even I ask the question, I want to thank Trademark East Africa. I was one of the ladies from Uganda that you've been helping, and you profiled my story through You Will, which was a good mentorship I received. And that leads me to the first question. I would like to see more young women being helped, not only the older one. I think we should have a kind of an intergeneration partnership where we have the older women teaching us, the young women, the values that they've been passing on. Yeah, clap if you're clapping. I think that would be nice. Yes, because if one time you're not here, I would like you to know as a woman, who else are you passing on the baton to? Who else are you empowering? So I think I would like to see that more. I think also I would love to see more women having their daughters here. I think that would be lovely. I don't know how many people came with their daughters, you know? How many people came with their daughters? Yes. So we really need to see more young women coming in the space of business. The other one is, I still started the cross-border trade, but still I think we are having still challenges at the border. I believe still maybe the people at the border are not yet informed. The information maybe is not yet there. I think it's one thing that also we should facilitate for as East Africa community. But at least the border right now with their toilets, there are things that are much better. And thanks to Trademark East Africa. Thank you so much.
I like the question, but I don't think that I will really satisfy you as you want, but I try my best. She was asking about what is EAC, Gender Department, doing to just talk about these women who are struggling, who cannot do ABC because of their husbands do not allow them to go, like say for business or for any other activity. Thank you for the question. That's the concern of all women, those who are here and those who are not here. Even men, some of men who do understand, but those who do not understand cannot raise that question. It's not their concern. So in EAC Secretariat, as we said, as our director, Dr. Aileen said before, we have a lot of documents. We have a lot of supportive documents talking about women equality, gender equality, not women, gender equality. Let's say currently we are developing and we are at a final stage. I think you'll get it from our first welcome remarks that we are developing a gender policy, EAC gender policy. As we are here, people are coming from Entebbe for its validation, for it to be presented to a sectoral council on gender very soon in April. We also have gender equality, equity and development bill. Also that one was talked about. Besides those two documents, we have EAC Gender Barometer. Those two, Gender Policy and the Gender Barometer, are going to be presented to Sectoral Council. And the Gender Equality, Equity and the Development Bill is going to be presented to heads of states for assent. Now, what are we saying? All those documents, what can they do? What can they really help in for our women? As I said earlier, each year we learn, we have a lesson. Those documents, they are not going to be dormant in our cupboards. They are like usual in our partner states or even at regional level. We like to develop policies which are not implemented. Am I lying? We have a lot of frameworks, policies, but implementation is not good. I know it's the same, even in our partner states. So this time, with that gender barometer we are talking about, we are going to set a framework where every partner state is going to be accountable for what they are doing to implement this gender policy. And for this, concern of women who are not really supported by their husbands, that's a big challenge. You know, gender equality cannot happen when there is no gender equity. Gender equality, we are all sitting on this table. If you can bring a ruler and put on our heads, we are not at the same level, but we are at the same chairs, and the table in front of us is really quite egalized for everyone. But if there was someone who is too short, sitting on the same chair, he or she should not see all of you like we are seeing you, but we are all at equal level. But if there is no equity, if we can't allow that one who is not tall enough to see all of you, that's not equity. We are not equal. So the gender equality is supported by gender equity. We need to start from our families, our homes. If your husband is not supportive, let us help each other. If I am sitting here, I'm telling you that I'm in Arusha, my husband and my children are in Bujumbura, but they are okay, I am okay, because they allowed me to go. They don't have any problem the other side. I don't have any problem the other side. They know why am I in Arusha, and I know why did they allow me to move to Arusha. So it's a big challenge. We challenge all families, our husbands, our relatives. We need to understand. So sensitization is provided, civil society is involved, and my colleague Nancy, when she moves to partner states, that's what she does. we are going to put on table not only women like this, we are going to involve even men to discuss about this gender equality and equity as well. Otherwise, if we discuss such issues as women only, we can't afford. We need to involve men this time. They need to know that this is the time for women to do something, because they are no longer breadwinners. They can't provide for the entire families. So really, Gender Department, EAC Secretariat, we are trying to move to involve men in our discussions so that we can all have good understanding and a common understanding to this issue of gender equality. Thank you.
So I'll be very quick. On your point on partnering with academia, yes, absolutely. Our second strategy is looking at partnerships with academic institutions and knowledge institutions, not just in our Women in Trade program, but across all our interventions in trademark. And we are actually hiring new research capacity at trademark to make those linkages. So I completely agree with you. On that very passionate declaration on marriage and the impediments to engaging in business, I mean, I agree with you. As Generose said, no one intervention can do everything. And I think, I used to work in women's rights at Human Rights Watch in New York and here, and it takes a lot of different interventions. There's policy interventions which are required, but as we know, policy is not enough on its own. You need organizations who then advocate for them to be implemented and make sure that they work. Then there are things that are peripheral, like improving women's access to property and addressing violence against women. It's a very, very large job. The part that we're taking is looking at economic empowerment, because economic empowerment is at least a step to allowing women to live in the world on their own terms. So I think for us, improving trade, improving incomes from trade, improving values. We met, like this lady, we've profiled one of the cross-border traders who left an abusive husband, built a small home for herself. With the kind of support we gave her, she was able to diversify her trade and increase her incomes to do that. So I think it's a lot of work, but I think we're taking the right steps. More youth, definitely. We're thinking in trademark of actually having a specific youth program. So we'll keep you updated on that. And the last question was about more needs to be done. As you heard, we're expanding this year. We're trying to target 300,000. My boss has asked us if we can try and push it to 1 million in the next 4 or 5 years, which we'll try and do our best. We're expanding to all of the East African borders. We were only working at a few. So now we're going to take our work to the rest of the borders and continue our work on capacity development, giving access to information, bringing women to markets, and so on. Thanks.
I now would like to welcome the CS, Honorable Edan Mohamed. Before you come, in this room we have the chairman of the East African Business Council, Mr. Jim Kabeho. We have board of directors, former chair, Madame Consolata from Burundi. We have Professor Maggie Chigozi from Uganda, and several other professional women in business in the room. We have women in business from Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and South Sudan. We have all cadre of professions, from the crafts to the professional women, to the consultancies, to the manufacturers. They are all in this room. And what we are trying to do is discuss how we can increase the participation of these women in intra-EAC trade. So the call on the public sector is to reduce the impediments, cut down the cost of doing business, make it easier for us to take advantage of the wider EAC common market and customs union that has been created for us. We also have partners with us, like Trademark and GIZ, who are supporting this whole process. The EAC Secretariat, the ministries of EAC affairs, we are working with them closely to see that we can actually capture this EAC market and go beyond to the CFTA, which the heads of state just launched the other day. yesterday actually. So in order to capture the African market, we need to get things moving in EAC, remove the bottlenecks, remove the impediments so that we can do it. And EAC being a leader in these things, I think for the women in business sector, we can also lead the rest of Africa. So without much ado, we appreciate your taking time to be here. I know you've just come from the summit in Kigali, but you thought it's very important to join us. We really appreciate and we thank you for that, for the honor you've given us to be part of this Women in Business Conference. Karibu, Honorable CS.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to say how pleased I am to be here. It's been a busy week. I see people like Professor Maggie, who I was with in Kigali yesterday, and I'm sure many others. We have this chairman of the East African Business Council here. I flew with the former chairman just a few minutes ago from Kigali, and really pleased to be part of this very important event, which we attach a lot of importance to as well. You know, when we were young, a lot of stories used to be told about how the world is what it is today, and how in long time ago men conspired on how to rule the world, what they did when they sat down together and decided how they will rule the world. I think it's becoming increasingly evident that there are now more women-only gatherings where similar kind of conversations are happening. And I think we have a few watchmen here who are here to guard against any event of what could go wrong. But I'm deeply honored, ladies and gentlemen, that the East Africa Women in Business platform have invited me to join you today for this first ever women-driven and women-organized conference to discuss issues relating to women in business. I commend the group for creating this platform where business and professional women from across East Africa can participate in regional integration by making their voices heard. You have done well in elevating women from the position of invisible producers and consumers to recognized investors and entrepreneurs across the East Africa region. With us today are members of this business platform who include representatives from national apex associations in different countries, networks of business women, professional women associations, and regional civil society organizations working to promote women's socio-economic advancement. With a database of over 30,000 women entrepreneurs and traders in the past year, the East Africa Women in Business platform have conducted trainings on business management trading in East African community for over 2,000 women entrepreneurs, something that is very commendable. They have supported the participation of women entrepreneurs and traders in regional events like this conference that we are having today, where we have over 150 women from the region exhibiting their products. I saw that as I was just walking in. We recognize and appreciate the role East African Women in Business platform do play in making trade in East Africa to be much more inclusive. The government and private sector need to jointly show their recognition of women's labor by providing a fair and productive environment for them to trade. It is therefore important to continually advocate for a balanced framework and policy change that will nurture the growth of women, both in domestic as well as cross-border trading. We encourage programs that seek to use existing infrastructure to implement and roll out various interventions focusing on women who today have largely been classified within the informal traders. The inclusion of women in formal trade and entrepreneurship is pivotal to improving the region's overall competitiveness. I understand Trademark East Africa, who are represented here, have played a big role in making this possible. We would like to thank you for the support and the capacity building that you have invested in the East African Women in Business platform. Please put your hands together for Trademark East Africa, who are known across all our East African member states. I believe I speak for many men and women in saying that Trademark East Africa have done well to empower women in East Africa. You mirror the African belief that you educate a girl, you educate the whole village, and in this case, empowering a girl to trade, you're effectively making the whole village rich. That a woman, cross-border trader in Busia, can now use the formal trade route at the borders without fear of authorities because she is educated on East African policy matters. You know, ladies now becoming much more involved in business is something that is emerging. But a lot has been said about women in building families, in making sure that education plays a very important role. And talking of education, a lot of women play a very key role in the evening in helping their kids to really read and write and get things sorted in matters education. And one evening, a child actually came to mom and asked, Mom, can you help me understand what is the difference between confident and confidential? And she said, well, I think maybe your dad can explain that better than me. And so in the afternoon, the following day, just by the football pitch, the son pulled the dad on the side as they were playing football, and he asked, Dad, what is the difference between confident and confidential? And he said, you are my son, and I am confident that you are my son. And you see that boy playing there? He's also my son, but that is confidential. And that was something that really sunk in very well. With a young man, it was something that sunk very well for him. You will agree with me that engaging in platforms like East African Women in Business and other similar platforms seek to further support business women to participate more effectively in intra-East African trade by linking them to information, technical assistance, as well as regional and international market. We urge partners like Trademark East Africa and others to join us to follow the path that Trademark has set so far. Ladies and gentlemen, the gap that is created between men and women in driving development in Africa is estimated to run into billions of US dollars and close to between 5 to 10% of Africa's GDP. We must empower women to close this gap by investing resources that support their SMEs to access market information, access finance, and to compete globally. Boosting women entrepreneurship and economic engagement could increase the GDP of African countries substantially as we go forward. Of course, women pride themselves as some people who are saving a lot, and that can be proven. Supporting women in economic empowerment benefits the whole society from the household to the national arena because women in East Africa have been known to reinvest over 90% of their income back into their families compared to between 30 to 40% of the men. And we wonder why that is the case. I think women have said a lot that they really are good in savings and do a lot of things. And this reminds me of a joke of how a man and the wife were sitting, and the wife asked the husband, do you drink beer? And he said, yes, I do. And she said, how many? He says, about 3 per day. He says, how long have you been drinking? 20 years. And how much does that cost? He says, well, $5 per pint. And she added the maths and did everything, and she said, well, that would have been about 108,000 US dollars. And he looked at her and he said, yes. And though she said, you know, you could have bought an aeroplane with that. So he just kind of looked at her and said, "Do you drink beer?" And she said, "No." And he says, "Where's your aeroplane?" And I think that was kind of end of story. Everybody kind of is proud to make sure that they do well at home. As government, we are very keen to see successful integration of the region and an overall functioning free trade area, as we have demonstrated, I think, within the East African continent. And this cannot happen without contribution and the role women play here in our own economies. One of the top, SDG goals is about gender equality and bridging that gap over time. The government of Kenya is committed to achieving the global goals, and so we are focusing on specific initiatives to deal with these issues of gender equality, both in terms of job recruitment and in terms of economic empowerment. And as a matter of fact, the government has set up an affirmative policy that today dedicates more than 30% of government's procurement to issues of women, youth, and people with disabilities, something that I'm sure, if they are not there already in some of the other countries in the region, would prove to be useful, as we have seen as well. I am told that by the end of today, that nearly 30 women businesses will be connected to buyers and be assisted to negotiate for competitive contracts, something that I'm very pleased to hear, and I would like to see if this number can be increased substantially in the coming years. I also understand that in addition to the East African Women in Business platform, Trademark East Africa is aiming to reach at least 300,000 other women traders in East Africa in the next 5 years, building their capacity to produce exportable products and then facilitating their connection to markets that we have. Talking of markets that we have, I did mention that what happened in Kigali yesterday was historic for the continent of Africa, where all African governments have now made a commitment to get and make Africa to be one common free trade area. And the significance of that, I think, hasn't even dawned yet to many people. To those of us who are in East Africa, it's as powerful as when we started setting up the East African regional integration many years ago. And what that means, if you were to focus by the year 2050, we will be in a situation where a GDP of more than $3.4 trillion will now be accessible to the over 2 billion African population that we will be having, and trading in countries like South Africa and Kenya, Tanzania and Nigeria, Libya and Seychelles would now all be like feeling that you are trading within the domestic regional market. And so what has made Africa to lag behind for a long time has been the small sizes of our respective countries that has not been powerful enough to attract investors to come and invest. And when people invest, the market is not big enough for people to sell their products. So people tend to look at bigger markets like China, India, and many others. So this is something that is really powerful. We hope that, the next step of ratification of these agreements is going to work out very quickly to make sure that these agreements come into effect. I would like to close by thanking the Gulf African Bank, who I'm told are some of the key sponsors, and Benchmark Solution Limited for supporting this conference through their sponsorship. Your act is a true show of public-private partnership in supporting this initiative. I would also like to thank Trademark East Africa for your continued support, both with government as well as with private sector institutions like this. And to the women here today, you have made your voices heard. I think I'm very pleased to see different nationalities represented here from East Africa. And the more we do things together, the more the unity becomes much stronger and we can learn from one another. You have remained resilient through tremendous challenges and have achieved tremendous success. And before I officially launch this conference, I just want to end with a final joke about English language. And somebody asked about the difference between the word finish and complete. They sound very similar, right? And you know, when people learn this, it's who you go to is really